Okay, so I've been going through some of our recent bills, and I just want to get this straight. You want us to fight Nazi cyborgs,
Yes.
and despite already having weapons at our disposal, you still commissioned Senior Ekis to construct a whole new weapon with money we don't have.
Correct.
And his solution to fight these Nazi cyborgs was to build a grappling gun, which is essentially a glorified rope.
I don't see where you're going with this.
Carl, I don't know if you should be making any more decisions.
Someone has to stop the Nazi threat.
And you really think a rope is going to do that?
Well, it's not just a rope. It can, it grapples things.
So what do you do with it?
You can swing with it.
And?
And it helps you climb things.
And?
Well, it's a rope. That's pretty much it.
Bionic Commando is a military-themed action platforming series that got its start as an arcade game, first developed and published by Capcom in March of 1987. It was released on Capcom's own hardware, which was built around the widely used Motorola 68000 microprocessor. Bionic Commando was the first game released for this hardware, and it would later be used for games such as F1 Dream and the original Street Fighter.
These days, Capcom is known worldwide for their profitable downloadable content, and more downloadable content, and for absolutely floundering Mega Man. But in the 80s, Capcom made their success with arcade titles such as 1942 and Ghosts and Goblins. The latter was created by Takeru Fujiwara, whose games are loved by masochists everywhere.
Fujiwara got his start in the video game industry in 1983, working for Konami. He joined Capcom the following year to work on their first arcade game, Vulgus. He quickly became Capcom's go-to guy for action games, and had 8 games under his belt before the release of Bionic Commando.
There are 4 names attached to Bionic Commando the arcade: Fujiwara, who directed it, Ghost and Goblins composer Harumi Fujita, and 2 programmers named Toshihiro Yamachi and Tahe Kumatsu, whose last names can be found hidden within the game's coding. The game expanded on ideas from Rock and Rope, the 1983 wire action game that Fujiwara designed during his Konami days.
Rock and Rope had a lot of limitations due to the hardware of the time. I had quite a few ideas I had been wanting to try piling up on the back burner.
Known as Top Secret in Japan, Bionic Commando stars Super Joe, who battles an evil army that aims to unleash a doomsday weapon upon the world. According to the official Bionic Commando canon, Super Joe is the same character from Commando, a 1985 top-view shooter. Story-wise, neither game has anything to do with each other.
Around this time, Capcom was expanding their market share by bringing many of their arcade hits onto home computers. Because of licensing agreements, Bionic Commando was ported to the Commodore 64 twice. For those of you wondering which version to get, stick with the UK version. The American version sucks.
In late 1988, Capcom brought Bionic Commando onto the Nintendo Entertainment System. But rather than a direct port, Bionic Commando was given an overhaul to better suit the hardware, while making improvements where possible. This approach must have paid off, because in 1992, the game would grace the Game Boy, the little handheld that could. Developed by Minakuchi Engineering, the Game Boy could be considered an NES port, but it's more of a retelling of that game with extra sci-fi elements and an anime art style. However, both games play similar to each other. Because of that, and the fact that we grew up with these versions, we'll be covering both the NES and Game Boy games of Bionic Commando.
In Japan, the game was released as Hitler no Fukatsu Top Secret, which loosely translates as Hitler's Revival Top Secret. Due to Nintendo of America and international policies regarding controversial topics, all references to Adolf Hitler and Nazism had to be replaced overseas. Yeah, there we go. Much better. No one will ever know. The generic story from the arcade version was given more depth. Set in the distant year of 1980X, Lad Spencer, a member of the Special FF Battalion, is sent on a mission by the Federation. to rescue Super Joe, and to foil the Imperial Forces' plans to reenact a top-secret doomsday project codenamed Albatross, developed by a long-gone enemy known as Bads, who are definitely not Nazis. General Izimo Kilt, leader of the evil Imperial Forces, plans to resurrect former Bads leader and totally not Hitler, Master D, so they can finish the Albatross project. Master D and the Albatross project? That sounds like a sweet hip-hop album.
The Game Boy storyline is the same as the NES, but with a number of differences. The General maintains his arcade name of Director Wiseman, the Imperial Forces are now the Door-Eyes Army, the FF Battalion is now the FF Corps, and Lad Spencer is now Rad Spencer. It's probably safe to assume that Rad was always the intended name. Those damn L's and R's are always messing with the Japanese.
Normally, this would be the point in our review where we would talk about some of the people behind these games. Unfortunately, this was during a time in which most video game companies required their development teams to work under aliases to prevent them from being offered better jobs. Goddamn assholes. Here are the credit listings for the NES version. Out of everyone here, only 2 names have been identified. Ichiro Toyoshima, a programmer whose only other video game credit is a special thanks in Mega Man 5, and Junko Tamiya, who worked with Capcom from 1987 to 1990. Prior to Bionic Commando, she provided music for 1943 The Battle of Midway, Tiger Road, and the NES version of Gunsmoke.
Tamiya created her compositions using a musical keyboard plugged into an MXX computer. She would then convert the music sheets into hex values so that they would be played back on Capcom's NES audio driver. As for the Game Boy version, sound designer Koji Murata has Bionic Commando listed in his gameography. Murata composed music for both Toza and Konami in the 80s, and for Capcom in the 90s. Bionic Commando's music is made up of synth pop rock backed with military marches for the drum beats. It's very fitting, as it pumps the player up for the mission. While some songs tend to get reused in later stages, there are memorable tunes such as Leap of Faith, Heat Wave, and the iconic Bionic Commando theme. In fact, the theme song and the power plant music are the only 2 tracks borrowed from the arcade, and they manage to sound even better as chiptunes.
The arcade version already featured 2 great songs in it. As a result, my supervisors asked me if I could make something along the same lines. Nevertheless, the composers of the 2 arcade songs asked me to still create the songs as I, Tommy-chan as they would call me, wanted to. I relied on the differences in the storylines between the NES version and the arcade versions to give the NES music some of its character.
The Game Boy's music is also unique. Murata composed new material while reusing several arrangements from both the NES and arcade. The new music is similar to Tamiya's composition, although a bit light on the drum marches. It's still not a bad thing, since music on the Game Boy stereo sounds amazing. Just check out Areas 0 and 1.
In case the footage hasn't clued you in, Bionic Commando is a side-scrolling action platforming shooter with a twist. The player takes control of Rad Spencer, who's equipped with a basic rifle, and most importantly, a bionic arm that extends and contracts. This is the main feature that differentiates Bionic Commando from other platformers. The bionic arm acts as a grappling hook, which is the only source of vertical movement. Rad Spencer cannot jump.
If the players had been allowed to jump, they would have grown too dependent on it. You asked me why I didn't put in the ability to jump, but the game would have been ruined if I had. So, I did my best without it. That belief of mine lives on in other titles, including the later Mickey Mouse game. I was pretty proud of it.
When the game begins, the player is presented with a free roam map and a helicopter to control. Before entering an area, the player is given an opportunity to equip Rad with a weapon, a communicator, and an item. After choosing your equipment, Rad will parachute into the level. There are 2 types of areas. The white tiles represent levels, while the red tiles represent neutral zones. Neutral zones are non-hostile areas where ally and enemy soldiers loaf around to forget their troubles. From here, you can gather information on what to do next, or collect new items and weapons to equip. Just don't tick off the neutral guards. Firing a single shot will cause the background to flash wildly as an endless wave of enemies parachute in to punish you for disturbing the peace. There are also enemy patrols scattered around the world map that move one tile every time the player does. If you land on the same tile as a patrol, you must engage the enemy in a short action stage, sort of like the Hammer Brothers in Super Mario Bros. The NES version turns the game into an overhead shooter. Activating the bionic arm has Rad swinging it in a circle, knocking back enemies. The Game Boy version dropped the overhead style of these stages and sticks to side-scrolling action. Once mastered, these stages are an excellent source for one-ups. Upon entering a level, the goal is to unlock the reactor room and destroy it. Killing enemies causes them to drop these little bullets that act like experience points. Gathering enough bullets will restore you to full strength and raise your maximum health by 1 point. Wow, if bullets did that in real life, America wouldn't need healthcare. Every level has a communication room, which is marked by this symbol above the door. From here you can radio home base for hints, and if you have the right communicator equipped, you can also wiretap the enemy's frequency to unlock the reactor room door. Wiretapping is the only way to unlock the reactor rooms, but sometimes an alarm will alert enemy soldiers to your position, causing them to rush in and shank you. Reactor rooms are always guarded. They can be filled with a never-ending platoon of soldiers, a bearded dude equipped with a shield and a bionic arm, or a tall cybernetic soldier who grabs and slams you. But my favorite is the floating bot that says PPP. It's by far the easiest boss fight. Interestingly, you don't have to kill the bosses. You can simply ignore them and go straight for the reactor core. Upon destroying the reactor, Rad is rewarded with experience points. Experience bullets. You can also get new weapons, items, and access to more areas.
Of course you won't do any of this if you don't know the controls. First, use the directional pad to control Rad's movement. Pressing left or right will move him accordingly. Holding down will put him in a crouching position. Pressing the B button will fire his weapon. Pressing A, the most important button, will activate the bionic arm. And oh boy is this thing fun to use. Depending on how you hold on to the directional pad, this thing will allow you to swing, climb up platforms, cross gaps, grab items, and push enemies away. So get used to that metallic clank, cause you're gonna be hearing it a lot. It gets a little weird from here. In order to use items, you press the start button. So how does one pause the game? By pressing select. Who the hell decided select was a good pause button? It goes against everything we've been trained to do as gamers. I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally wasted healing items trying to pause this game. That aside, Capcom did a great job with the controls here. The bionic arm feels so good that the lack of jump button never comes to mind.
The last levels of the game are quite difficult, and if you manage to beat the final boss, your work isn't done yet. You still have to get one final shot in during a free fall to defeat the evil leader. The NES version includes some pretty graphic content.
What the hell, Nintendo of America? I thought you censored everything.
They did. I guess they just missed a spot.
So you're telling me that they took all the time to take out all of the reverse Buddha symbols, but they leave in the Inglorious Bastard ending?
Hey, what's with the timer?
Oh yeah, the self-destruct sequence.
The game finally ends when you successfully escape the base before it explodes. Super Joe and the entire world are safe once again.
So what became of Bionic Commando in subsequent years? In 1999, Nintendo dusted off the IP and released Bionic Commando Elite Forces on the Game Boy Color. A reasonable entry in the series, although generally ranked lower than the previous two games. It features smooth animations and more violent gameplay.
9 years later, Capcom released a remake of the original game with Bionic Commando Rearmed. Available for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC, the game was well received by critics and gamers alike. It had an official sequel in 2011, which resulted in mixed reactions, with most feeling the game was less fun than its predecessor.
Capcom took the series in a different direction in 2010 with a sequel lazily titled Bionic Commando. Ditching the side-scrolling gameplay of the rest of the series, Bionic Commando is a full 3D action game that aimed to bring the series into the HD era. The game sold very poorly, only selling 27,000 copies in America during its first month.
Tokuro Fujiwara served as general manager for Capcom's console games division from 1988 to 1996. After 13 years, he left the company to form a short-lived studio, Whoopee Camp, creating Tombas 1 and 2. He returned to Capcom in 2005 and continues to act as a producer. Mad World, released in 2009, is the last game he's designed thus far.
Harumi Fujita left Capcom around 1990 to start a family, and became a freelance composer. She kept working in the video game industry until around 1999. She now composes music for stage performances and does audio consulting. When leaving Capcom in 1990, Junko Tamiya continued to work in the music field as a composer, arranger, and producer for concerts and stage performances. In 2014, she and Fujita attended Bit Summit along with several other former Capcom composers. She enjoyed herself so much that Tami-chan took part in the conceptual chiptunes album, Project Light. After working on sound design for some of Minakuchi's engineering games, Koji Murata later worked for Yoshi Dayama Workshop Corporation from 1995 to 2010. He currently works at GrooveBit as an executive producer.
Bionic Commando has quite the following today, enough to warrant an appearance in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. In a way, the games are underrated because of the steep learning curve for the controls. But once you figure them out, they can be really exciting. The NES version manages to smooth over the rough edges of its arcade counterpart, and is a better game overall. However, if we had to choose one, we actually prefer the Game Boy version. The controls are tighter, the music arrangements have the added benefit of stereo sound output, and the art direction has a lot more character. If you haven't tried it, we highly recommend giving the Game Boy version a playthrough. You won't regret it.
Bionic Commando is a fun arcade game, an awesome NES game, and a must-have Game Boy game. An excellent departure from the conventional side-scrolling shooters that all gamers should play. And while we haven't played through Rearmed yet, it seems like a great way for modern gamers to experience the swinging action of Super Joe and Rad Spencer. Bionic Commando, we salute you. Well, Carl, I admit that grappling gun actually worked. I'm sorry I doubted you.
Apology accepted.
Now how in the hell are we supposed to pay for these bills?
I've got that handled too. This morning we received a space letter.
How?
That's not important. What is important is that I've accepted the commission.
What commission?
Someone wants us to capture a Roadrunner, and with our experience with Freddy's Rescue Roundup in episode 1 of Twin Opinion available now on our YouTube channel, I figured why not? They even said they'll pay our bills for us.
Isn't that a little too convenient and incredibly suspicious?
What? It's just a mysterious request from an unknown third party who's claiming to solve all our problems if we accept. What's the worst that can happen?
The idiot brother has accepted our proposal. Soon we will all get what we want. Revenge.